52 Sketches Podcast, Episode 7, Rogue Pianist, Kimberly StarKey.
Welcome to 52 Sketches, a podcast about creativity and creative practices. Here's your host, Rob Head.
Welcome to the 52 Sketches Podcast. I am your host, Rob Head. We are here again to talk about living a creative life, creativity practices, habits, strategies for making wonderful things and experiences. In this episode, I am so pleased to welcome Kimberly StarKey to the show. Kimberly StarKey, also known as the Rogue Pianist, is a classically trained contemporary pianist and composer. Her musical style can be described as powerful, radiant, dreamy, and inspiring. Rooted in both the romantic period of classical music and contemporary styles, her debut album of original piano compositions, Dream, was nominated for Album of the Year in 2014 by Whispering Solo Piano Radio, and her composition Ascension was nominated in the Contemporary Classical Instrumental category at the 2016 Hollywood Music in Media Awards. And she's since gone on to ever greater success in the years since with new releases. So welcome, Kimberly.
Thank you for having me, Rob. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, so I usually ask a bit of a risky question at the opening here. I want to ask you, how are you in this sort of 2020 pandemic era? How are you and your loved ones, and how you doing?
Thanks for asking. To be totally honest, I know this is not the situation for a lot of people, but for me, it's the best thing that ever happened to me.
Hmm. Why
You weren't
is that?
expecting that, were you?
No, I was not.
You almost choked on your water there. You're like, what?
Tell me about that. What? So, is it because it's enabled you to focus, or
Yeah.
what's
Yeah. Well, so for me, music, the whole way it started, my love of the piano and my love of music started as a very solitary thing, just me with my piano in my living room in the dark, having like a moment with God or whatever the heck is up there. And so as I delved into music and like delved into a music career, it took me away from home and away from my living room, and and I would go out and I would play gigs and I would do a lot of things that were very social and very kind of extroverted activities. And I'm actually a really extroverted person in a lot of ways, but my art, my music comes from a very introverted private place. And so,
right?
yep. And so for me, it was like I was kind of spinning out of control before the pandemic, and I ended up moving into the mountains. And last year, I lived in the mountains with my boyfriend and with his mom and our dogs, and we're all in the mountains. And it was a rough winter last winter, and I got through it. And I said to myself, actually, I said to my mom, I was like, Mom, I am never going to be isolated again. And then like 2 weeks later, COVID hit and we were in complete isolation again. And so, And so it just, for me, it was like, it was actually hard to be, isolated at first. It was definitely a shock to my system, but little by little, it's been such a wonderful thing. We took this little garden shed that was on the property and was filled with black widows, and we turned it into this little music studio for myself. And that's something I've wanted for as long as I can remember, is my own space that's like not attached to anyone's, house or anything, and just my own space. And so, so I just feel like, it's like coming home finally after many years of being too social for too long.
Back to piano in the dark.
Yes, exactly.
I could.
In my pajamas.
Yeah. That's my instrument as well. And that I can completely relate.
Exactly.
Yeah. So let's back up. Let's start at the beginning and write your backstory. Tell us about your creative upbringing. Where are you from? What did you do? And what mediums were you involved in when you were coming up?
Well, That's a good question. So here's the thing. Nobody really in my family is artistic at all. Nobody plays any instruments. Actually, I take that back. My mom likes to do watercolor painting, but she hasn't pursued that professionally or anything.
Right.
Um, and so for me, music wasn't the thing that got me into music. It was actually, I know, it was actually something traumatic that happened when I was 5 years old. My dad passed away,
Oh.
and we just so
Mm.
happened to have this piano sitting there in our living room, and that my grandparents had given us, and nobody really played it or anything. I mean, I had poked around on it, but and I thought it was cool. But
Yeah.
after my dad passed away, and I was going through so many emotions of anger, actually was the first one,
Hmm.
because I was
Yeah.
so mad that he was playing this joke on us by leaving and not coming back. And I just thought he
Mm.
would come back.
Wow.
And every day I would come home from school and I just thought he was going to be there waiting. And he
Mm.
never did. And so I had all this anger and all this grief, and I didn't know what to do with it. And one day I sat at the piano and I played probably one note, and I just felt this kind of like this beam of light and connection just going from the piano and me all the way up to somewhere, and I felt connected to him for the first time again. And so that's how
Mm.
I got into music, and that's the experience that I seek every time I play the piano or do a project. So
Wow. You're mm. Yeah, you haven't told me that story before, and yeah, it's very moving. You know, I think
yeah.
back to I was also 5 when I discovered the piano, but my story is much dumber. I saw
Oh,
Star Wars,
is
and
dumber
I
a
fell in
word?
love with the music. I don't know. It is if you're dumber. Uh, so, you know, uh, wow. So from the very beginning, from the first moment, this was about finding that sort of, for lack of a better word, a sort of a spiritual connection.
Yes. Mhm.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow. I'm sorry
Yep.
for your loss, first and foremost.
Thank you.
Yeah. Mm.
Thank you.
So where did it go from there? Was it no turning back and the piano became your best friend, or how did that develop?
Pretty much. It was always like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And it was always either a piano player, like I didn't know the word pianist back then. So it was like, I want to
Uh-huh.
be a piano player or a whale trainer.
Right, right. Yes.
Which actually I
Yeah.
think they're sort of correlated, because I was obsessed with orca whales, and I feel like they're both big and they're both black and white and they're both full of spirit and
They're
passion. So
basically the same
they're
thing, let's
basically the
face it.
same thing,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
I only
yeah.
had access to the pianos, unfortunately. So
Yeah. Well, you
if I
gotta
could
make
be a
do with what you got. Yeah,
yeah, if I could like
yeah.
be a piano player slash whale trainer all at the same time, that would be my ultimate fantasy. But but yeah, I think from there it was
You must have had teachers and whatnot as a kid, yeah?
yes, I was always so it was always me searching to have that experience again. And so my entire life I have weaved back and forth between learning and getting, instruction and taking lessons, until I
Mhm,
would reach to this point where it felt like that experience was not happening, until it felt like it was
mhm,
too much in my brain and not enough in my heart. So then I would quit,
mhm,
and I would just go back to playing the piano in my living room. And then I would be
mhm,
like, oh, I want some more tools. And so I would weave back and forth. And so I didn't have like one piano teacher growing up. It was like I'd have a piano teacher and then I would quit, and I would tell my mom, like, if she didn't let me quit, then I would just never play the piano again. So I would threaten her, and she actually like totally would give into it. She'd be like, oh, well, we can't have that happen. Which I'm actually glad, because then I just got to really go with how I felt with music. And then
mhm.
it really
So you're saying wait,
yeah.
wait, wait. So
Mhm.
sh so you're saying that she allowed you to quit whenever you felt like it. Is that what you
Well, yeah, she would put up, I'm sure, some kind of resistance, but my mom is
Uh-huh.
like very sweet, and she just was like, "Oh, well, if you don't want to do it, then, you don't have to do it."
Right. Right. Well, this is
Yeah.
one of the classic issues between developing artists and a parent, right?
Mhm.
Are they pushing you?
I
If they
know.
don't push you enough, then you end up being like, I wish you'd pushed me more. And if they don't
Right.
push you, then you're like, or if they do push you, then you're like, I'm
Yeah.
quitting.
Basically, they just
And
can't
yeah.
win. Yeah. Whatever they do
Yeah.
is just wrong once
Parenthood.
you grow
Yeah.
up.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, but
Yeah.
I'm actually glad my mom did that. I really am.
Hmm.
I was
Good.
convinced I was never going to go to college because I also had developed learning disabilities, and this all stems back to when my dad passed away. I ended up going to kindergarten a few months later, so it was my first
Hmm.
experience with school. I was grieving during that time, and so
Right.
my teacher would always say, "Wow," like she would say to my mom, like, everybody's lining up like I asked, but Kim is over there just staring at the sky, like off
Mm.
in
Right.
her own world. And that's just
Right.
how I was pretty much all growing up. I was always looking out the window, um, always just, in another world. And so I was convinced I wasn't going to go to college. I didn't even
Hmm.
graduate high school. I got a GED. But then
Hmm.
I ended up going
Okay.
to Musicians Institute for recording engineering, which was actually not the right program for
Hmm.
me at all.
Hmm.
But, I learned some stuff about sound. But then my sister convinced me to go with her to Alaska, and this was a pivotal moment in my life
The
because it was
the great
during she
frontier. Yeah.
the great frontier, yes. And so I decided, okay, I'll go with you just to like help you get there. And so we drove up, and it just so happened that we left on like the same day that the worst storm of like the decade had
Hmm.
come through our town. And it literally, the storm, like I'm pretty sure it started right above us, and then we drove underneath it. We both moved at the same speed. It was like 30 miles an hour, and we just drove all the way up to Alaska under this storm. And it, was like above us. And so what should have taken like 3 or 4 days took
Hmm.
like 9 days. And by
Wow.
the end, she had convinced me to go to college because she's like, you can eat pizza, you can just do whatever you want. It's like you can play the piano, you can go. So I like got there, and I was like, I'm going to go to college. And I walked into the, piano professor's office, and
Hmm.
he was like, okay, show me some of your repertoire. And I was mainly somebody who just played my own stuff. I just
Right.
make stuff up.
What's repertoire?
And yeah,
Yeah.
repertoire. What's that?
Oh,
Exactly.
yeah.
Literally. And so, yeah, so I just made something up. I remember just making
Hmm.
something up, and he
Hmm.
didn't, I don't think, know what to make of me. And
Right.
so then he
That is
put
not the
some music.
formula. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So then he put some music in front of me, and he asked me, can I read music? So I said, yeah, I can read music, thinking like, I know where the middle C is on the staff.
Right. Right.
Or,
Right. No,
and
he was like, no, can you sight
yeah,
read music?
yeah. So he put some like crazy looking stuff in front of me, and I was like, oh, heck no. Like, I can't
Yeah.
do that. So then he put something easier, and I was like, nope, can't do it. Then he put like Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, and I was like
Hmm.
plucking out the notes, and I'm like, see, I can read music. um, but he ended up seeing that even though I didn't have this traditional classical background,
Hmm. Hmm.
he knew I had a love for the piano, and he could see the musical expression in me. So
Hmm.
he took me under his wing, and he taught me as much classical as he could. And I learned so much, and it was really a hard period of like, it was a lot of a stretch for my brain and my hands, and even just performing classical music in front of people, in front of the jury, that they have
Right.
these judges and things like that.
Right.
But I learned so much, and that's exactly what I wanted. And so now I feel like after college, I took those tools, and then I took the inspiration that I have had my entire life from wanting to connect to something greater,
Hmm.
and I combined those two. And so now I just work on projects that really do combine those two, and I focus
Hmm.
more and more every day on on doing projects that I really want to do.
So
So
during that developmental period, how many years were you in Alaska?
about 6.
Oh, wow. Okay. And
but
then,
but do- but I only was going to college for probably 3 of those years. I don't know,
uh huh,
something like that.
uh huh. Did you have
Hmm.
any particular mentors or people that you felt like were really influential in your development?
Well, definitely my piano instructor, Dr. Zilberkant. He was, from Russia and was like a child prodigy. And he was just the biggest influence because he was so incredibly passionate about music
Hmm.
that I
Hmm.
was just like enthralled. I never knew how passionate classical music could be. I always thought it was just like, like this
Hmm.
like proper music that you play while you're drinking your tea in a fancy little
Right. Right.
restaurant. But this was like full blown passion, like I had never seen it. And
Hmm.
so that's
Hmm.
where I fell in love with the romantic
Era.
classical music.
Yeah.
Yes, the romantic era.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. And if I remember correctly, another Russian prodigy, Dr. Tutanov, who's local here,
Hmm.
is somebody that
Yes.
you studied with later. Is that right?
I did. Yes. I got to work with him as well. I came back from Alaska because I got into a silly relationship with a boy.
it's always there's always a
that
relationship that, yeah. And
yeah,
then I
that
was in a
pretty
completely different
yeah,
place. Yeah.
exactly. And it ended like, like any big symphonic work should. So I moved back to Ashland and then got to work with Tutanov. Yes. For about, I want to say a year at the most. And then,
Hmm.
yeah, I took a really long time to graduate, but I did get to work with him for about a year.
One of the things that this story reminds me of is that I think it was last year, you released a song called "She's No Beethoven," and I think there's a story behind it from this time period in your life.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. So what was that about?
Well, so that was, one of the schools I had gone to. I won't say which one, but one of the school, yeah, one of the schools, and I think these people
Not
that
to
are
disparage
in.
anyone. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
because I have so much respect for people in music education.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's just that there was a certain clash because I was so inspired to compose, and yet I didn't really feel like I felt like in these music departments there was a lot of music equals playing
Classical
pieces that have
repertoire.
already been written.
Hmm.
Yes,
Hmm.
specifically mostly classical. And
Hmm.
so anyway, I was sort of having a tough time and I went to talk to one of the professors. It wasn't one of my main
Hmm.
professors, but she ended up I said, I want to compose, but I'm not really feeling like I'm fitting in and stuff like that. And she said, "Well, Kimberly, it's not like you're Beethoven." And
Ugh.
and now, meaning, and what I took that to mean is that I wasn't important enough because I wasn't Beethoven. Like I wasn't important enough to
Uh,
feel that I belonged
like
where I
any of us
was.
is, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly. And so it
yeah,
really didn't sit well for a long time. And it just, I had a lot of insecurity, like
yeah.
because I didn't come from the same background as a lot of other music
Hmm.
students in
Hmm.
colleges. And
Yeah,
so, yeah, so eventually I used that as fuel to be like, you're right. I'm not Beethoven. I am Beethoven is
yeah,
the only
yeah.
Beethoven that ever will exist. And I am the only me. And we don't have to compare. It's
Yeah,
different. But
yeah.
I want to be the best me that I can be.
Mhm. There's a long tradition of
Yeah.
this. I think back, e even Schubert, like, just a few years after Beethoven had passed away, was saying, "After Beethoven, what can anyone do?" You know, like, there's this shadow that these great geniuses or whatever you wanna call them cast over,
Hmm.
the subsequent generations, and I think they get mythologized, as if they weren't a real human
Yes.
being just writing music, like everybody else.
Right.
And yeah, yeah, and get sort of calcified
Hmm.
into this legend. um,
Yes.
yeah, yeah, it's
Yeah,
fascinating.
and
So,
that's where I just kind of, look at each musical piece as sort of like a fingerprint.
mhm,
I mean, it's like no matter how hard anyone tries to even sound like someone else, it never can be done. It's always a little bit different. It's always unique in
right,
some way.
yeah, yeah. Well, it's inspiring the way you took that experience and were able to say, okay, I'm going to use that as material, as fuel,
Mhm.
for my own, yeah, and literally for your own, for expressing your own unique musical voice, which is a cool
Mhm.
way to approach that. So,
Yeah.
did you arrive, pretty quickly at something resembling a professional career? Did you what did you do to survive after you finished schooling and your studies?
Yeah. So I started by teaching. Like I jumped
Hmm.
into teaching because it was a way to make an income by doing something that I love, all day, which
Yeah.
is like playing the piano and teaching people how to play the piano. And I love people.
Hmm.
So there was a lot of good about that. I also started accompanying for churches and doing church music because that was another way to make an income as a musician.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
which was very interesting because I don't really sight read, and yet I was the accompanist for a choir. And
Yeah.
so I just had to I just did the best I could. And I mean, I was actually, I was like, wow, I can't believe I'm doing this. I'm actually like accompanying a choir. But I would use a mixture of reading the music and also like improvising and just also going like, what do I want this to sound like for the choir? How do I want to support the choir? And I would do it that way.
Right. Right.
So yeah, I did those two things. I jumped into that. I did that for about a decade. And I don't know if there's something to a
Yeah.
decade. Like, there's something about spending 10 years doing something. You kind of go, I think I need to
Yeah.
shift some
Reflect.
here
It's
somehow.
funny.
Yeah.
My grandmother, Lila Head, was a piano teacher and church accompanist for like 70 years.
Wow.
And that was her legacy, and she just
Mhm.
kept going. Yeah. For
Wow.
and yeah, in fact, to this day, her legacy is that she bought the piano that's sitting in my studio right now
Oh,
for my
wow. Well,
father, who passed it down to me. So yeah,
oh,
yeah. It is a path
it
that
is.
musicians in the previous generations, it was one of the paths that you can take to, make a dependable living, was teaching, of
Mm-hmm.
course, and then
Yep.
accompanying, especially in faith communities. And yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But so after 10 years of that, you were
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, I want to do something else.
Yeah, I always said if church was on a different day than Sunday, I would do this forever. But nobody was listening to me and no one changed the day of church.
Yeah, maybe you needed to find a Seventh Day Adventist church or something.
Yeah, apparently. Oh,
Yeah,
see, I didn't even think about that.
it's a
But
thing. It's a
yeah,
thing. Yeah,
I should
yeah,
have done that. But anyway, no.
yeah.
Yeah, because the issue that I faced was that I would, start teaching on Mondays, and then I would teach all week, and I would have, choir rehearsals and things like that. And
Hmm.
then when Friday came around, and it's like that's the moment that my brain needed a break to
Hmm.
just like,
Hmm.
not worry and just. But then I would immediately start worrying when Friday came around because Sunday was coming up, and like,
Right.
okay, do I know my music? Do I know which hymns I'm playing? Am I supposed to be playing, special music? Do I need to rehearse with anyone? Like, what do I need to do? And then like Saturday, I would become more preoccupied with it, and then Sunday I would do it, and then afterwards, after church, I'd be like, woo, I'm done. Like I've accomplished my week. And then Sunday night I would do like nothing after church. I would just like probably just eat pizza and whatever, like. And then Monday would come, and it's like boom, back at it.
Start
And
over.
so
Yeah.
yeah, if
So
I
it's
were
kind
a
of a
more
grind after a
it was
while.
a grind. If I
Yeah.
were more like, able to compartmentalize and not put every part of my soul in everything I do, I'm sure I could have probably managed it better. But
Right.
that's it
Right.
just didn't quite work with me. So eventually I burnt out several times during that 10 years.
Yeah.
And
Well,
yeah,
I'm
so
so
yeah.
impressed because in my family, because of my grandmother, the story I just told you,
Yeah.
the sort of the definition of a competent musician was somebody who can sight read out of the hymnal,
Oh my
and
gosh.
so the fact that you don't have a traditional background and yet you somehow
Yeah.
survived 10 years doing
Well,
that, you
I
know,
I think
it's
that's
great.
exactly why it was extra,
It was a little more stressful than if you had more of a traditional, like,
exactly.
accompanying background. Yeah.
Yeah, because I can just sit down and be like, "Oh, I'm gonna open, hymn number 424 and just play it." It's like, no, I had to practice that, figure out what the chord progression was, and
Yeah.
then, yeah. So, but that's amazing that your grandma could do that.
Yeah, that was the message I always got from my father was, all right,
Yeah.
see if you could play this, anyway.
Yeah.
Um, very cool. So okay, so what happened near the end of that? It sounds like
Yeah.
you were ready to do something else.
Yeah. Okay. So then, the end of that, I actually went through like a divorce. Not like
Mhm.
a divorce. It was a divorce.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
Sorry. I like
Literally
to take
a divorce.
serious
Yeah.
things and somehow laugh at them. But anywho,
Right.
so
Right.
yeah, the end of that, it was really all about, I had this dog. You probably saw my Facebook post this morning.
Hmm. Hmm.
Elaine, her name was.
Ah,
And
she was so
I,
precious. Yeah.
yeah, I got her by accident. People don't
Mm.
understand how you can get a dog by accident, but I did
didn't
get her by
didn't mean to
accident.
get a dog, but
I
here she
didn't.
is. She's living here now.
And here she is. Yeah. And anyway, because, just to sum up the story, because I would love to tell the whole story, but, this is about creativity. But I will say, I got her from the animal shelter. And the whole reason that we even went there was to just pass time because I had my niece in the car and she was 2 and we wanted to like pet a dog. And they were all pit bulls except for this one little one. So I'm like, well, just to make sure no pit bulls bite her head off, which most pit bulls are really nice. I'm not saying anything bad about pit bulls, but when they're from the animal shelter,
You never know.
and you don't know them, you have
Hmm.
no idea.
Yep.
So we took this little dog out and I just was like being nice and I was like, oh, she's so cute, and then long story short, they were like, oh, well, do you like her? And I'm like, yeah, and they were like, okay, well, do you want to apply?
Here
Like,
are the
and I'm
adoption
like,
papers.
oh,
Yeah.
yeah. And they literally gave them to me and I'm like, oh, thanks. And I thought that I was going to be able to walk out and just fill them out. Like, well, I wasn't even going to fill them out at all. I was going to walk out. I didn't want to like hurt their feelings. So I'm like, oh,
Right.
thanks, and then she like gave me a pen and then a clipboard and stood there and watched me and was like, you can sit right there at that desk. And so I'm like, oh gosh. So then I filled it out thinking, okay, in my mind, I'm like, I'll just give him the adoption papers and then when they go to call me, and because I'm sure they'll have to review it and like talk to people, when they call me, I'll just tell them I'm sorry, something came up and I can't actually have a dog anymore. But I was too embarrassed to like change my mind right then. So I just did it, gave her the thing, and she just like took 3 seconds and looked at it and was like, okay, looks good. That'll be $80.
Here's your new best friend.
Yeah. And then I was like, I don't have $80. And I looked at my sister and she's just handed me her credit card. And I'm like, okay. So that was it. We got her.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, the whole point of that is that she really, having that dog, I was in no place really to have a dog, but having that little dog was like having a heart on the outside of my body. And I could see if something wasn't good for me, if I was really stressed out, it would affect her. And the more happy that I was, the happier she was. And so that just started a whole thing of really assessing my life and looking at what really actually brings me joy and what is it time to let go of. And so I ended up letting go of a lot of things. And it has been quite a crazy few years to say the least, but I let go of a relationship. I let go of where I live. I
let go of teaching?
And I let go of teaching. Yep.
Yeah.
I let go of accompanying.
I want to fast forward a little bit. You recorded several albums of your original music to a not unreasonable level of acclaim, and you got a lot of attention and some airplay and streams, and all this stuff started happening for you. And I know that you eventually started collaborating with various other artists, and I want to talk about one in particular. You co-wrote "The Fire Within," which is a contemporary double piano concerto with Jennifer Thomas, and and that did really well. It did like debuted in the Billboard classical music charts, and it did very, very well. Classical Song of the Year in the 2020 International Music and Entertainment Awards. It did great. So, wow, tell us about that relationship and how that piece eventually came to be, and I would love to hear about how it came to be performed.
Yeah.
Was that the intention from the beginning?
Yeah. So there's this word, it's called dialectic. And there's this form of therapy called dialectic behavioral therapy. And it's based on the premise that two opposites that seem mutually exclusive of each other can both be true. And so my whole music career has really been a dialectic where it's definitely been filled with struggle and like, just poverty and like, just like angst and like, why isn't it, and struggle, all of that. And on the flip side, it has been so amazing. And this is one of those projects that is just like art. I have to pinch myself. Like, is this really real? And, like a little background on that is that like, I was just this, nerdy internet fan of this girl, Jennifer Thomas, for many, many years, probably for 10 years, for the entire time that I was going to school and then teaching and
Yeah.
all of
You're
that.
like
And I
fangirl.
was
Yeah.
I was a fangirl, and I was
Yeah.
always like, gosh, if only I could, like this, she's doing what I exactly want to do, but in my own way, of course. And
Hmm. Hmm.
and so yeah, I ended up um having a late night binge of Ellen DeGeneres videos and Jennifer Thomas, and like got wild, I mean, just like thinking, just in my
Started dreaming.
deranged, yeah, dreaming. And
Yeah.
I'm like, you know what, I'm going to be really wild here. I'm going to email her or like, reach out in some way. So I reached out and ended up, just I'll skip all the details, but basically she ended up being this really nice person. She found out I played the piano and she listened to my music, and she, lo and behold, loved it.
Mm.
And we became like best friends. We're like pretty much, we talked every day now. And
Wow.
yep. And and then she eventually, and I didn't have any expectations,
Right.
of anything. In fact, when we first like connected on the internet, I was like, can I come up this weekend to your house and play the piano for you? Cause I was determined. I was like, I want her to hear my music. And she said no. Cause she's like thinking probably this crazy girl on the internet,
Yeah.
like is going to be a stalker or something.
I think you
But
get a no from most
yeah.
people. Yeah. That you just met.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. I think
Yeah.
maybe not. But yeah, we ended up becoming really good friends.
So
We
cool.
just supported each other in our a common quest to, of loving the piano and playing piano music. And then eventually she asked me if I wanted to collaborate with her. And so just to clarify, it is her project. She produced it. She financed it. She came up with like the idea and the title and all of that. And then she asked me to co-write the piano part. So I went up there. She lives in Washington, and we co-wrote together. We had so much fun. And then we ended up, she invited me to be in the music video, The Fire Within. And we
I remember there was kind of a brouhaha over lighting a piano on fire, and people were like, "Oh, that's so disrespectful,"
yes.
blah blah blah. But it was like an
yes.
old junky piano, and anyway, it was like she got all this drama for no reason. Yeah,
she got like slammed by the internet. I think it was like 2 million people that on Classic FM saw this article that was misstating that it was saying she lit a Yamaha piano on fire, and that is not true. She lit her stunt piano, which was completely broken. They had used it for tons of videos, and it was like it was like a farewell celebration. It was a really important moment for her to let this piano become ashes.
Yeah.
And it was, not at all what the article portrayed. And so yeah, she got slammed for that. But eventually they tweaked the article, so now it's correct. But unfortunately, people, they don't go back and look and figure out all the details that have been edited.
Right.
But anyway, so
nobody reads the corrections. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
But anyway, yes, so we got to do the music video, and then we got to perform at Benaroya Hall in Seattle with the Ensign Symphony, which was a dream come true for me because I have been wanting to perform original music with a symphony for my entire life. And so that was a dream come true.
Yeah. Well, I mean, most composers, you never get there, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's so great. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I want to move on a little bit to what your life is like. One of the things that this podcast is about is how do we build a life that enables us to do our work and our art,
Yes.
What are your daily practices, or regular practices? How do you care for yourself, and how do you stay on top of your work, your skills and your instrument?
Yeah. So for me, first thing is your environment, and really taking a look at, and I don't mean like your environment, like every single little thing, trinket needs to be put in place, like in your office or whatever. In fact, I actually always leave some kind of work to do out. Always. Like if I clean too much and get too much done, then I'm like anxious because I'm like, well, I don't know what to do. So I always leave like, I'll get everything done except for like one thing that I can look forward to doing that one thing the next day.
Right. What is
So
that? There's a
yeah.
Japanese word for that. I think it's wabi
There
sabi.
is?
Yeah. It's this idea
I
of the
had
beauty of
no
imperfection.
idea.
Yeah. That like leaving one thing undone or imperfect is,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I used to be terrified of my inspiration. Actually to the point where it gave me a mental illness, which was obsessive compulsive disorder, because I was
You
terrified.
were worried that you wouldn't be inspired or
No, I was so inspired, and I would have all these crazy inspirations. Like,
Mhm.
that moment where your brain lights on fire and it's like,
Mhm.
wow. But the problem is I had so many of those that it was impossible to get them all done. And then I had this fear of like, well, if I don't
Right.
follow my intuition, like then,
Oh, I
that's not
see.
good.
Yeah. Ideas are cheap, and when inspiration
Yeah.
hits you every day and there's no way you can do all of those
Yeah.
things, right? You
Yeah.
don't have
Yeah.
enough lives, there aren't enough days in a
Yes.
lifetime to do all the things that even the great ideas, So,
Yes, yes. And if you
yeah,
were to
yeah.
actually do those ideas, some of them would actually bring you down. Like if you have this
Mm,
idea to go spend $10,000 on, this new piano or whatever it is, like
right,
which actually pianos cost way more than $10,000. But
right.
but
Good ones anyway.
yeah. But like that might not be good for your life, and that might not be actually the right, an effective thing
Right.
for your life. And so something that really helped me, and I think it was out of a book called, oh gosh, what was the book? It was a book on creativity.
Yeah, I don't know.
This is why I play instrumental music, because I don't have to remember words.
This is why you're an improviser. Yeah.
Yeah, but I remember the concept from this. And
Uh-huh.
so, the concept was that these inspirations, and I'm going to, say it relay it in my own way, but
Right.
these inspirations are like, you actually get to choose which ones you want to collaborate with. And you can say,
Right.
no, I'm not your person on this one. And so
Mhm.
for me, that has been hugely beneficial because it's given me control back over my
Oh,
life.
that's
Like just
fantastic.
because I can see how something could work, or even might be inspired by it, or maybe even my intuition is saying like, that it would be a beautiful thing. Like I get to still choose, is that something in my
Yeah.
life that I want to take on?
I love the way
And
that you're
so,
framing that,
yeah,
because as if it's coming from this, world of inspiration, but you
yeah,
don't have to be the only one that can make it happen. You can be
yeah,
like, okay,
exactly.
that's
Yeah,
awesome. I'm going to
yeah.
pass on that one. Go find
Yes,
someone
you can go
else.
find exactly. And
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. I
Yeah.
actually feel like I'm at this precipice right now where it's like a new beginning of a new decade. And
Mm,
I've gotten to do these collaborations with people. I've gotten to be featured in 5 music videos in the last like 2 or 3 years. I've
that's
actually gotten to
fantastic.
be yeah, I've gotten to be featured in music videos that have pretty much like all of the elements, like fire. Now I'm going to totally make myself look like an idiot, but it's like fire, water. What is it? Fire,
Earth,
water,
air.
earth,
You're a
air. Yeah.
bender.
So
Yeah.
exactly. So I had the fire with the fire within. We had literally our faces were like melting off because we were in front of real fire. And, then we had the water. I had,
Uh,
snow. I've been in several
oh
or in
yeah,
at
yeah.
least
Snow
one
in
video
LA,
with
right?
snow.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
For a Christmas video, I had earth. So I had dirt and chinchilla litter thrown at me because I was in an apocalyptic music video. The
Uh-huh.
chinchilla litter looked really like it made it look like explosions, and the producers just found that, or the directors found that the chinchilla litter really looked better than even like the fake dirt or whatever. I'm pretty sure is
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
happened. And then what is the last element? Wind
Air.
or
Yeah.
air? Yeah.
Yeah.
So then
Yeah.
in that apocalyptic video, they had this huge like commercial fan that was blowing the chinchilla litter at me. And so that was like blowing in my eyes and stuff. And
Yeah. The
so
things we
I've
do
got,
for art. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So I've gotten to do all these
Uh,
projects, but like you witnessed this morning, you were like, "Where's your bio?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's like, what do I have to show for all this?"
oh
So
my
I had to like
goodness.
type one up really fast.
Yeah.
But so I'm at this point where I'm like, okay, I've really lived a lot in the last 10, 15 years. And
Yeah.
now I want to, it's really me coming forth as my authentic self, and having the time and space to do it, and being in just a much more mentally and emotionally healthy place to
Yeah.
do that. So
Yeah.
so a lot of good things to come, I believe.
Yeah. So talk to us about your life a little bit right now. What do you accomplish in a typical week? I don't mean like, checking
What do I
boxes, but
accomplish?
what do you, what does your week look like,
Yeah, well, I've come to realize I kind of live like a fish. Like, I don't even think in terms of weeks. I just think in terms of like right now and
Right?
today.
It's continuous stream of now. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And like if someone's like, "What did you do yesterday?" I'm like, "I have no idea." Um
What was
but
yesterday? Blur's Day? Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I have no idea. I have a lot of variety in my life.
Hmm.
I'm able to be there for family members who are ill, and
Hmm.
I'm able to kind of do some like caregiving, which actually is so crucial to my music because it
Mm.
connects me with people who are like
Your loved ones,
pe-
going back to
y-
your
ex-
origin story. Yeah.
exactly. And it's like it just shows you uh just the value of life,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
the when life
But
can go
just like
away,
the
like really
yeah, just the
fragility of
preciousness, the
life.
fragility and the
Preciousness.
preciousness.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that inspires my music. So
Mm.
I have that, and then I have my dog. So for me, like as far as what I do, like the main thing I do is just like setting myself up to be in a positive frame of mind.
Mhm.
And so right now I'm working on building a website, and I'm working on, like, after this call, I'm going to be finishing composing for The Flight of the Bumblebee, which is,
Nice.
we're doing our own arrangement, Jennifer and I, of The Flight of the Bumblebee. And I'm so excited for that. And then I've
That
got
sounds fun. Are
another
you gonna get to
project.
perform that again somewhere?
Yeah, I believe we're going to do a music video for it
I see.
eventually. And
Right.
I had a dream that we were supposed to perform it and Brene Brown was going to speak right after us, and I didn't know how to play it. And I drove up to try to learn how to play it, and on the sheet music, all it was infographics, and we were trying to understand how it was like.
That I've never heard those words strung together into a sentence. Uh,
Yeah. So,
all right.
yeah.
Fantastic. Well, Kimberly, it's just wonderful to chat with you. And
Thank you.
is there anything you'd like to share with, say, a younger artist who's maybe 15 or 20 years, behind
Mm,
you coming up?
I would love to. Okay. First of all, comparison is the thief of joy.
Mm,
And it's so easy to compare ourselves to other people,
Beethoven.
yeah, like Beethoven, exactly. And that was a perfect reference. And so, like, seriously, if you can gently and lovingly stop comparing yourself to other people, instead of comparing, you can celebrate other people. If there's
Mhm.
somebody else who is farther along in their career or whatever, you can celebrate them and be like, wow, that's really awesome. Um, and just the other thing is, like, the way you dream. So I used to dream very out there, very in the
Mhm.
future. If you can actually flip your dreams to where you think, okay, like, if, let's say you dream that if I have this best selling book, then
Mhm.
or maybe I should use music as a
Album,
reference,
sure.
because
Yeah.
album, there we go.
Yeah.
I have a top
Is
charting
that still a
album.
thing? Yeah.
Right.
Download?
Exactly.
Stream?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Then I will feel, accomplished and successful and liberated and all this stuff.
Mm.
Well, if you can flip that and say, you know what? I am now going to choose to feel accomplished and liberated and successful. And from there, you can choose what you want and you can go for it, but always starting with the emotions that you want to feel and the energy you
Mm.
want to feel, and going from there. Because if you don't, what can happen, and I fell into this of like, I had this dream that was out there. And then I was filled with this energy of like, but I'll never make it. It's so hard. There's no way. Oh my gosh. And so then even if I would actually accomplish something, I couldn't even enjoy it because it was like, was that really worth all the suffrage I just put myself through? And no, it really wasn't. And so now it's like, I just start with like coming from the energy of what I want, and the feeling of, the feeling of dreaming is exciting. Like, at least for me, I used to drive with my mom and we would have a mocha and we would like dream about the future. And literally when I look back, that was like the best part of it all. It wasn't where I got. It was that moment in the car with my mom drinking a mocha and just like how happy and free we felt. So that, would be my advice for anybody.
Fantastic. You remind me of folks that say, you're already worthy. Just do your thing.
Yes.
Yes.
Love it.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time today. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. I appreciate you as well and your team. So thank you so much for having me. I hope tons of people listen to this podcast and feel a sense of their own creative expression just blooming when they listen to it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
The 52 Sketches podcast is a product of 52 Sketches, makers of earlywords.io, daily, private, stream of consciousness writing to clear your mind and unlock your creativity.
Taking us out, the latest release from the Rogue Pianist, Quarantine.